This isn't the food court, sweetheart. VIP only. The receptionist's smirk widens as her gaze sweeps over Amara Sterling, making no effort to mask the disdain in her voice. It's 5:17 p.m. and golden light spills through floor-to-ceiling windows onto leather chairs and polished brass. An oasis for first-class travelers at Logan International, designed for white collars, not black skin. Amara doesn't blink. She holds her platinum card and boarding pass like scalpel and shield, her silence honed by years in boardrooms, where control is everything. Her jaw tightens once. That's all. The woman leans in, tone syrupy and scornful. Lost? Or just testing your luck? Amara places her card on the counter, fingers steady. Feel free to verify. A soft chuckle. Sure, if it's real. A few nearby passengers glance up and then quickly look away. The performance is just beginning. 10 minutes later, guess whose career was shattered beyond repair? The interior of the VIP lounge spreads before Amara like a sanctuary of leather and mahogany, its atmosphere designed to soothe the weary business traveler. She selects a corner table near the windows, settling into the plush seating with her laptop bag and a modest carry-on. Her outfit speaks of professional success without screaming wealth. A crisp white blouse, tailored black slacks, and a simple watch that could belong to any mid-level executive. What the staff doesn't know is that Amara Sterling is the chief executive officer of Sterling International, the parent company that owns the airport management group responsible for this very lounge. She's traveling incognito after a grueling acquisition meeting in Chicago, having deliberately chosen this location to observe operations before implementing new customer service protocols across her subsidiary companies. The decision to travel without fanfare wasn't born of humility alone. Amara learned long ago that the truest measure of a company's culture emerges when leadership isn't watching, or when leadership appears to be someone who doesn't matter. When America sends its hopes on the future. No matter what, Derek Watson, the lounge manager, emerges from behind the service counter. At 50-something, he carries himself with the pompous authority of someone who's never been challenged on his small kingdom. His eyes sweep the room before landing on Amara, and he leans toward a nearby server with a whispered comment that makes both of them glance in her direction. Keep an eye on that one. His voice carries just far enough for Amara to catch the edge of his words. The server, a young woman named Jessica with nervous energy and darting eyes, approaches Amara's table with obvious reluctance. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I need to verify your boarding pass again. It's company policy." Amara looks up from her laptop, where she's been reviewing quarterly reports for her hospitality division. "I already showed it at the desk," she says calmly, but reaches for her documents anyway. Jessica examines the boarding pass with theatrical scrutiny, while a businessman at the next table, white, middle-aged, dressed in wrinkled khakis, receives his complimentary drink without any verification whatsoever. The irony isn't lost on Amara, who makes a mental note about the disparity in treatment. "I'd like to access the business center," Amara says, closing her laptop. "Could I get the key?" Jessica's face contorts with practiced regret. "Oh, I'm sorry, but it's temporarily unavailable. Maintenance issues." 5 minutes later, Amara watches as Jessica hands the business center key to a white businessman who hasn't even finished his sentence before receiving assistance. The lie lands between them like a gauntlet, and Amara feels the familiar burn of institutional racism dressed up in corporate politeness. From across the room, Derek's voice drifts over the ambient noise of CNN and quiet conversation. "You have to watch certain people," he's saying to another staff member. "They try to act like they belong in first class, but you can usually tell." Amara's phone buzzes with messages from her executive team. The Sterling International logo on her phone case catches the light, but it's a detail that goes unnoticed by staff, too busy making assumptions to observe reality. She responds to urgent communications, using corporate terminology and decision-making authority that would reveal her position to anyone paying attention. Transparency affects other people. You don't really know who, but they're not paying attention. They're too busy deciding who belongs and who doesn't, based on nothing more than the color of her skin. The afternoon sun shifts lower in the sky as the lounge fills with the usual parade of business travelers seeking refuge from crowded terminals. Amara has spent the last hour documenting what she's witnessed. Not just the treatment directed at her, but the systematic patterns of service that reveal themselves when observed with a trained eye. Derek approaches her table with the confidence of someone who believes he holds all the cards. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to relocate to one of our corner tables. This section is reserved for our premium members." Amara looks around the half-empty lounge, then at the table Derek is indicating, a small, cramped space near the restrooms that would be insulting to assign to anyone. "I am a premium member," she says, her voice steady but carrying an undertone that would make her executive team recognize the danger signals. "Well, yes, but we have different levels of premium service," Derek explains with the kind of exaggerated patience usually reserved for children or the mentally impaired. "I'm sure you understand." What Amara understands is that the table Derek wants her to vacate will remain empty for the next hour, just as it had been empty for the hour before she arrived. She also understands that 3 other passengers, all white, all dressed more casually than she is, have been seated in the premium section without question. She gathers her belongings and moves to the assigned table, but not before taking note of Derek's name tag and the employee identification number printed below it. Every detail matters when you're building a case for systematic discrimination. "Excuse me," she says to Jessica, who passes by with a tray of drinks. "Could I get the Wi-Fi password?" Jessica pauses, glancing toward Derek before responding. "The basic Wi-Fi is lounge guest, but the high-speed network is for verified premium members only. I am a verified premium member, Amara says, producing her platinum card once again. "Oh, well, that's a different verification process," Jessica stammers. "You'd need to speak with management about upgrading your access." At the table next to her, a man in a rumpled polo shirt is loudly complaining about the slow Wi-Fi while using what is clearly the premium network. Nobody asks for his verification. Nobody questions his right to access. The microaggressions accumulate like paper cuts, each one small enough to deny, but collectively forming a pattern too obvious to ignore. When Amara requests a fresh coffee, she waits 15 minutes while Jessica serves every other table twice. When she asks about the business center again, she's told it's still under maintenance, though she can clearly see other guests using the facility. A middle-aged white woman at a nearby table begins speaking loudly into her phone about how certain people are making the lounge feel uncomfortable and not what it used to be. She gestures not so subtly in Amara's direction, and Derek nods sympathetically as he passes. "We try to maintain our standards," Derek assures the woman, his voice carrying clearly across the space. "But sometimes people slip through the cracks." Amara's fingers tighten around her coffee cup. In her corporate world, she's known for her ability to remain calm under pressure, to think strategically rather than react emotionally. But this isn't her corporate world. This is the world where she's stripped of her title, her authority, her identity, and judged solely on the basis of her appearance. She opens her phone and begins documenting timestamps, employee names, and specific incidents. She photographs the policy posters on the walls, the employee handbook guidelines posted near the service counter, and the empty premium tables that somehow remain too exclusive for her platinum membership. Across the room, Elena Vasquez, a Latina businesswoman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, has been watching the interactions with growing concern. She recognizes the pattern because she's lived it herself, and she begins discreetly recording with her phone. "This is about to get much worse," Elena murmurs to herself, watching Derek's increasingly bold behavior. but something tells me they have no idea who they're messing with. The evening rush brings a fresh wave of travelers to the lounge, and Derek seems to interpret the audience as an opportunity to make his authority clear. He approaches Amara's table with Frank Morrison, a security guard whose presence immediately draws attention from other passengers. "Ma'am, we've had several complaints about your presence, making other guests uncomfortable," Derek announces, his voice projected to carry across the surrounding tables. "I'm going to have to ask you to relocate to the general seating area." The words hit the lounge like a dropped glass, shattering the polite pretense of civilized travel. Conversations halt mid-sentence as heads turn toward the unfolding drama. Amara feels the weight of dozens of stares, some curious, others judgmental, a few uncomfortable with what they're witnessing. "I'm curious about the nature of these complaints," Amara says, her voice carrying the measured tone she uses in corporate boardrooms when someone has made a serious error in judgment. "Could you be more specific?" Derek's smile takes on a predatory quality. "Well, there have been concerns about fraudulent credentials. These membership scams are getting quite sophisticated, but we've trained our staff to recognize the signs." The accusation hangs in the air like smoke, and Tamara feels the familiar sensation of being reduced to a stereotype, her professional accomplishments and personal dignity stripped away by someone who sees nothing but the color of her skin. Around the lounge, she can hear the subtle sounds of judgment. Whispered conversations, the soft beeping of phones as people begin recording, the rustle of newspapers as others pretend not to notice. "I'd like to speak with your airport manager," Amara says, reaching for her phone. Derek's laugh is sharp and dismissive. "He's busy with legitimate business concerns, but I'm sure we can resolve this quickly if you just cooperate." Frank positions himself at Derek's shoulder, his hand resting on his radio in a gesture that communicates threat without words. The implication is clear. Comply or face escalation to a level that could involve arrest, criminal charges, and the kind of public humiliation that follows people forever in the age of social media. "You know what I think?" Derek continues, his confidence growing with each passing moment. "I think you're part of one of these credit card fraud rings. Steal someone's identity, make fake membership cards, live the high life on someone else's dime. We see it all the time." The accusation draws gasps from nearby tables. A woman in a business suit clutches her purse tighter. A man in an expensive watch moves his laptop bag closer to his chair. In the space of a few sentences, Derek has transformed Amara from a fellow traveler into a potential criminal, someone to be feared rather than respected. Amara's phone buzzes with an incoming call, and she glances at the screen. David Chen, her chief operating officer. She lets it go to voicemail, knowing that answering might reveal more than she's ready to share. "Not yet. I understand your position," she says to Derek, her words carefully chosen, "and I appreciate your dedication to security. Perhaps you could provide me with your corporate contact information? I'd like to submit some feedback about my experience." Derek's expression shifts to something between amusement and contempt. "Oh, you want to file a complaint? That's rich." "Lady, you're about to be escorted out of here by security, and you want to complain about customer service?" Elena Vasquez rises from her table and approaches with purposeful strides. "Excuse me, but I've been watching this entire interaction, and I need to say something." She looks directly at Derek. "This is discrimination, plain and simple, and I'm documenting everything." "Your Honor." The woman looks at me, her tone still soft, but directly. Derek's face flushes red. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seat. This is a security matter." "The only security issue I see is how secure you feel in your prejudice," Elena replies, her phone clearly recording. "But I wonder how secure you'll feel when this goes viral." Frank steps forward, his radio crackling to life. "We may need backup at the VIP lounge," he mutters into the device, Amara observes the escalation with the analytical mind of someone who's spent decades studying organizational behavior. She recognizes the tipping point, the moment when individual bias becomes institutional discrimination. She also recognizes the opportunity, not for personal revenge, but for systemic change. Her phone buzzes again. This time it's Maria, her executive assistant, and the message is urgent. Board meeting moved to 9 p.m. Need your location for logistics. Amara looks at Derek, then at Frank, then at the growing crowd of onlookers. She thinks about the hundreds of other travelers who've faced similar treatment without her resources or authority. She thinks about the employees who've been taught that this behavior is acceptable, even encouraged. Funny how these rules only apply to one kind of person, she says, her voice carrying across the lounge. But I wonder, do you really know who you're dealing with? Derek's radio crackles as he calls for reinforcement, and within minutes, Richard Kane arrives with the harried expression of a man who's been pulled away from more important matters. At 60-something, Richard carries himself with the authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. His expensive suit and confident stride suggest a man who's never had to question his right to be anywhere. What seems to be the problem here? Richard asks, his tone suggesting that the problem is obvious and sitting at the corner table. Derek launches into his explanation with the enthusiasm of someone finally getting to tell his side of the story. Sir, we have a situation with fraudulent credentials. This individual has been disrupting our lounge operations and making other guests uncomfortable. We've attempted to resolve it diplomatically, but she's become increasingly hostile. Richard's assessment of Amara is swift and dismissive. He sees what Derek sees, a black woman who doesn't fit his mental image of who belongs in first-class accommodations. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification. Driver's license, passport, anything that can verify your identity. I've already provided my boarding pass and membership credentials, Amara replies, her voice steady despite the growing crowd of onlookers. What additional verification do you require? Well, we need to understand how someone in your situation can afford these premium services, Richard says, his implication clear to everyone within earshot. Are you traveling on business? What's your occupation? The question hangs in the air like a challenge. Around the lounge, other passengers listen with varying degrees of comfort and discomfort. Some nod in approval, satisfied that someone is finally asking the hard questions. Others shift uncomfortably, recognizing the racial profiling but unsure how to respond. Derek seizes the moment to elaborate on his concerns. Sir, I've been in hospitality for 15 years, and I can usually tell when someone doesn't belong. The way they carry themselves, the way they interact with staff, the way they present themselves. I see, Richard says, his tone suggesting that Derek's assessment confirms his own suspicions. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to open your carry-on bag. We've had reports of inappropriate items being brought into the lounge. The request draws murmurs from the growing audience. Elena continues recording, her phone capturing every word and gesture. 2 other passengers have joined her in documenting the incident, their devices creating a digital record of institutional discrimination in action. This is absolutely ridiculous, says James Wright, a black businessman in his 50s who's been watching from a nearby table. I've been traveling through this airport for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Derek turns his attention to James with barely concealed irritation. Sir, I'm going to need you to remain seated. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me plenty, James replies, rising from his chair. Because I've been getting the same treatment for years, and I'm tired of pretending it's normal. Richard's face reddens as he realizes the situation is spiraling beyond his control. Ma'am, you have 2 choices. You can cooperate with our security procedures, or we can have you removed from the airport entirely. TSA takes these security concerns very seriously. Frank positions himself between Amara and the lounge exit, his presence a not-so-subtle reminder of the consequences of noncompliance. His radio crackles with updates from airport security, and the implied threat of arrest hangs over the entire interaction. Jimmy winces at the thought. Let me understand this correctly, Amara says, her voice carrying the precision of someone accustomed to parsing complex legal documents. You're suggesting that my presence in this lounge, despite valid credentials and payment, constitutes a security threat? I'm suggesting that your behavior has been disruptive and your credentials are questionable, Richard replies. And I'm telling you that we have the authority to remove anyone who poses a threat to the safety and comfort of our other guests. The accusation of disruptive behavior draws incredulous looks from several passengers who've been watching the entire interaction. Elena's recording captures the irony. Amara has remained calm and professional throughout, while Derek and Richard have become increasingly agitated and confrontational. This is insane, mutters a woman at a nearby table. All she did was try to use the business center. Derek spins toward the comment with aggressive defensiveness. Ma'am, unless you were here for the entire interaction, I don't think you're qualified to make that judgment. I've been here for 2 hours, the woman replies. I've seen exactly how this started, and it's disgusting. Richard attempts to regain control of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that this is uncomfortable, but we have protocols in place for everyone's safety. Sometimes these situations require difficult decisions. The only difficult decision here is whether to report this to the FAA or the ACLU first, Elena calls out, her phone still recording. Because this is textbook discrimination. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop recording, Frank says, moving toward Elena. This is a security matter. Actually, this is a public accommodation and I have every right to record, Elena replies, her legal knowledge surprising the security team. And this recording is going to show exactly how this airport treats people of color. Richard's desperation becomes palpable as he realizes the potential consequences of the situation. Look, maybe we can work something out. If you're willing to relocate to a different area of the airport, we can avoid any further escalation. The only thing I'm willing to do is file a comprehensive complaint with your corporate headquarters, Amara says, her patience finally beginning to fray. And I'm curious to see how they respond when they review the security footage of this interaction. Derek's face goes pale at the mention of security footage, and he glances toward the cameras with obvious concern. The cameras in this section have been malfunctioning, he says quickly. Technical issues. How convenient, James Wright observes. Cameras malfunction just when they might capture something embarrassing. Richard pulls Derek aside for a whispered conversation, their body language suggesting growing panic. They're beginning to realize that this situation has attracted too much attention, created too much documentation, and involved too many witnesses to quietly disappear. Amara's phone buzzes insistently, and she glances at the screen. David Chen again, followed by messages from Maria and 3 other members of her executive team. The urgency of the communications suggests that her absence from planned calls is causing concern at the highest levels of Sterling International. I need to take this call, she says, reaching for her phone. Ma'am, you're not taking any calls until we resolve this security issue, Richard says, his authority beginning to sound hollow even to his own ears. Actually, Amara says, her voice carrying a new tone of finality, I think it's time you understood exactly what kind of security issue you've created. The phone rings again, and this time the caller ID shows David Chen's name clearly enough for several nearby passengers to see. Amara looks at Richard, then at Derek, then at the growing crowd of onlookers who've begun to sense that something significant is about to happen. David, she answers, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet lounge. Yes, I'm still at the airport. Actually, I'm conducting an impromptu quality assessment of our premium service. It's been quite illuminating. David's voice is audible through the phone speaker, his words carrying the unmistakable tone of corporate authority. Amara, the board meeting has been moved to 9 p.m. Do Do you need the operations team there to prepare anything for your arrival? The name Amara, combined with the reference to a board meeting and operations team, creates a ripple of confusion among the staff. Derek's confident posture begins to waver as he processes the implications of what he's hearing. Actually, David, I think we need to have an emergency discussion about subsidiary oversight. Amara continues, her eyes fixed on Richard's increasingly pale face. I'm discovering some significant gaps in our customer service protocols. She stands, and her entire demeanor shifts from defensive to commanding. The change is subtle but unmistakable. Shoulders back, chin up, voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. Richard, Derek, she says, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the lounge. I believe you both report to Sterling International's subsidiary, AirCorp Management Services? Derek's face drains of color as he recognizes the Sterling International name. His hands fumble for his phone, frantically searching through corporate directories while Richard stands frozen in growing horror. I'm Amara Sterling, she continues, producing her corporate identification and CEO credentials. Chief Executive Officer of Sterling International. Your ultimate boss. The words hit the lounge like a physical force. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Phones are raised to capture the moment. Elena's live stream suddenly has 200 viewers, then 500, then 1,000, as the revelation spreads across social media. Frank's radio crackles with increasingly urgent communications as word spreads through airport operations. Maria, Amara's executive assistant, arrives with a team of corporate executives, their presence confirming what Derek and Richard are desperately hoping isn't true. Ms. Sterling, Maria says, her voice carrying the professional deference of someone who works directly with the Fortune 500 CEO. The legal team is standing by, and we have HR representatives en route. How would you like to proceed? Derek attempts to backtrack with the desperation of a man watching his career disintegrate in real time. Miss Sterling, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were just following standard security protocols. Standard security protocols? Amara interrupts, her voice carrying the cold precision of someone who's spent decades in corporate boardrooms, that seem to apply exclusively to passengers of color. Is that correct? Richard tries to join the damage control effort. Ma'am, Ms. Sterling, if we had known who you were, you would have treated me with respect? Amara asks. But because you didn't know who I was, discrimination was acceptable? The airport's general manager, Susan Torres, arrives in obvious panic, her professional composure barely masking the terror of someone who realizes that her entire career may be at stake. Miss Sterling, I cannot begin to apologize for what I'm learning has happened here today. What you're learning, Amara says, is that your subsidiary companies have been violating basic civil rights laws while operating under the Sterling International umbrella. This isn't just about customer services. This is about systematic discrimination that exposes our entire corporation to legal liability. Elena's live stream has reached 10,000 viewers, and her commentary provides real-time context for the unfolding corporate drama. Ladies and gentlemen, you are witnessing the moment when institutional racism meets corporate accountability. This is the CEO of the company that owns this airport management firm, and she just experienced discrimination firsthand. James Wright approaches with obvious satisfaction. Ms. Sterling, I've been documenting similar treatment for years. I have emails, photographs, and witness statements that could help establish a pattern of discriminatory behavior. I'd like to review all of that information, Amara says, her executive mind already shifting into strategic mode. Maria, please coordinate with Mr. Wright to gather documentation of any similar incidents. Derek makes one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Miss Sterling, I want you to know that this was never about race. We treat all our guests with the same high standards. Derek, Amara interrupts, her voice carrying the finality of someone who's made a decision. You're terminated, effective immediately. Frank, you're suspended pending investigation. Richard, you'll be meeting with HR and our legal team first thing tomorrow morning. The swift justice draws murmurs of approval from passengers who've been watching the drama unfold. Elena's live stream comments explode with reactions as viewers witness the rare spectacle of discrimination meeting immediate consequences. Susan, Amara continues, addressing the general manager, I want a complete audit of all customer service interactions in this lounge for the past 6 months. I want to know if this is an isolated incident or part of a pattern, and I want it on my desk by tomorrow afternoon. Her phone buzzes with notifications as news of the incident begins spreading beyond Elena's live stream. Corporate communications teams from Sterling International are monitoring social media mentions. Legal teams are preparing for potential litigation, and board members are requesting immediate briefings. Ladies and gentlemen, Amara addresses the lounge, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to addressing large audiences. I want to apologize for what you've witnessed today. This behavior does not represent the values of Sterling International, and it will not be tolerated moving forward. The lounge erupts in applause, with passengers who've been watching the drama unfold finally able to express their approval of the outcome. Elena's livestream reaches 20,000 viewers as the story begins trending on social media platforms. Derek gathers his belongings in stunned silence, his 15-year career in hospitality effectively ended by his own prejudice. Richard's attempts to negotiate a different outcome are met with the cold professionalism of corporate legal teams, who understand the liability risks of continued discrimination. This is what accountability looks like, Elena tells her live stream audience. This is what happens when discrimination meets real consequences. The corporate conference room adjacent to the lounge becomes a center of swift and decisive action as Sterling International's legal and human resources teams mobilize with the efficiency of a company that understands the stakes involved. Derek sits across from a table of executives, his earlier confidence replaced by the hollow expression of someone watching his professional life collapse in real time. Mr. Watson, says Jennifer Martinez, Sterling International's chief legal officer, your employment with Air Corps Management Services is terminated effective immediately. You'll be escorted from the premises, and your access to all company systems has been revoked. Derek's attempt to protest is cut short by the presentation of documented evidences. Security footage, witness statements, and Elena's livestream recording that has now reached 50,000 viewers and climbing. The video evidence is damning, showing clearly that his treatment of Amara was based on nothing more than racial prejudice. 15 years of service, Derek mutters, his voice barely audible. 15 years, and this is how it ends? This is how it ends because this is how you chose to behave, Jennifer replies without sympathy. Your actions have exposed Sterling International to significant legal liability and reputational damage. The company's response will be swift and comprehensive. Richard faces a different but equally devastating outcome. While his termination is postponed pending investigation, his management authority is immediately suspended and his professional reputation within the aviation industry is effectively destroyed. The incident has been documented not just by Elena's livestream, but by multiple passengers whose recordings are already circulating on social media. I'll never work in airport management again, Richard says, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. 25 years of building my career, and it's over because of one incident. One incident that revealed your true character, responds Tom Bradley, Sterling International's Director of Human Resources. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was systematic discrimination that you not only participated in but actively encouraged. Frank Morrison, the security guard, receives a formal reprimand and mandatory sensitivity training, his lesser culpability earning him a second chance that Derek and Richard forfeited through their leadership roles in the discrimination. His union representative negotiates to keep his job, but his reputation within the airport security community is permanently tarnished. Jessica and the other staff members who participated in the discriminatory treatment face disciplinary action ranging from formal warnings to mandatory retraining programs. The company's message is clear. Discrimination in any form will result in consequences proportional to the level of involvement. Susan Torres, the airport general manager, issues a public statement that becomes a model for corporate crisis management. Sterling International and our subsidiary companies are committed to providing equal treatment to all customers, regardless of race, ethnicity, or any other protected characteristic. The behavior witnessed today does not reflect our values, and we are taking immediate action to ensure it never happens again. The corporate response extends beyond individual punishment to systematic reform. An independent audit is ordered for all Sterling International subsidiary companies, examining customer service practices, employee training programs, and complaint resolution procedures. The company commits to implementing anonymous reporting systems for discrimination and establishing regular bias training for all customer-facing employees. Alina's live stream, now archived and shared across multiple platforms, becomes a case study in how social media can create accountability for institutional discrimination. Her follow-up videos documenting the corporate response generate additional millions of views and establish her as a voice for social justice in corporate settings. The legal consequences extend beyond employment termination. Derek faces potential civil liability for his role in the discrimination, and his behavior becomes the subject of an EEOC investigation that could result in federal civil rights violations. His termination for cause makes him ineligible for unemployment benefits and creates a permanent record that will follow him throughout his career. Richard's suspension becomes a termination within 48 hours, as the full scope of his discriminatory behavior becomes clear through witness interviews and security footage review. His management certification is reviewed by aviation authorities, and other airports quietly remove his name from consideration for future positions. The industry response is swift and decisive. Airport management associations issue statements condemning discrimination and highlighting the incident as an example of the consequences of prejudicial behavior. Derek and Richard become cautionary tales, their names associated with the kind of institutional bias that companies can no longer afford to tolerate. James Wright, the businessman who supported Amara during the incident, receives a formal apology from Sterling International and an offer to join the company's new customer advisory board. His documentation of previous discriminatory incidents becomes part of a broader investigation into systematic bias within the airport management industry. The passenger who complained about Amara's presence finds herself unwillingly featured in Alina's viral video, her prejudicial comments preserved forever in digital format. Her employer, contacted by concerned viewers, initiates its own investigation into whether her behavior reflects company values. Frank's union representative negotiates a settlement that includes sensitivity training and a formal apology, but the security guard's reputation within the airport community is permanently damaged. His colleagues, aware of his role in the incident, treat him with the mixture of disappointment and disgust reserved for those who abuse their authority. The lounge itself undergoes immediate transformation. New training materials are posted prominently, customer feedback systems are implemented, and diverse staff are hired to ensure that future incidents are prevented through both policy and cultural change. As final paycheck includes a severance package calculated to minimize Sterling International's legal exposure, but his professional reputation is destroyed beyond repair. His LinkedIn profile, once proudly displaying his 15 years of hospitality experience, becomes a digital scarlet letter that follows him to every job interview. Justice, Elena tells her social media followers, isn't just about punishment. It's about creating consequences that prevent others from making the same choices. Today, that happened. 1 month later, Amara Sterling returns to the same airport lounge, but the transformation is immediately apparent. The space itself remains unchanged, The same leather seating, the same mahogany tables, the same floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the tarmac. But the atmosphere has shifted fundamentally, charged with the kind of respectful professionalism that comes from comprehensive cultural change. The new staff greets every passenger with genuine warmth, their training evident in the way they interact with travelers of all backgrounds. The business center operates smoothly, available to all members without the artificial barriers that once existed. Customer feedback tablets at every table invite real-time input, and the diversity of the staff reflects Sterling International's commitment to inclusive hiring practices. Amara chooses the same corner table where she experienced humiliation, but now she's treated with the respect that should have been automatic from the beginning. Not because of her title or corporate position, but because she's a human being who deserves dignity, regardless of her race or status. Maria approaches with the quarterly reports from Aircore Management Services, the subsidiary that operates the lounge. Customer satisfaction scores have increased 30% since the policy changes, she reports. And we've received multiple letters from passengers praising the new service standards. Elena Vasquez, now a recognized advocate for civil rights in corporate settings, stops by during her own travels. Her initial live stream has generated over 2 million views, and she's used her platform to highlight similar incidents while promoting companies that demonstrate genuine commitment to equality. You know what I learned from all this? Elena asks, settling into the chair across from Amara. It's not enough to be quietly successful. Sometimes you have to use your privilege to create change for people who don't have the same opportunities. James Wright, now serving on Sterling International's Customer Advisory Board, joins them with a portfolio of recommendations for industry-wide reform. His documentation of discriminatory practices has become the foundation for new training programs that are being implemented across the aviation industry. The ripple effects have been remarkable, he says. Other companies are proactively reviewing their policies because they don't want to become the next viral video. Fear of consequences is creating the change that conscience should have motivated years ago. Amara reflects on the experience with the perspective that comes from time and distance. I keep thinking about all the other travelers who've faced similar treatment without having the resources or authority to fight back. This wasn't really about me. It was about everyone who's been made to feel like they don't belong. The conversation is interrupted by a young black woman in business attire who approaches their table hesitantly. "Excuse me, but are you Amara Sterling?" she asks. "I'm Sarah Johnson, and I wanted to thank you. I'm a consultant and I travel frequently for work. Since your story went viral, I've noticed a real difference in how I'm treated in airport lounges and hotels. It's like people are finally paying attention." The interaction represents the broader impact of the incidenta cultural shift that extends beyond Sterling International to influence industry practices across the hospitality sector. The fear of becoming the subject of viral scrutiny has motivated companies to examine their own practices and implement preventive measures. "That's what makes this worthwhile," Amara tells Sarah. "Individual justice is important, but systemic change is what creates lasting impact. When companies understand that discrimination carries real consequences, they're motivated to prevent it." The lounge manager approaches, a young woman of mixed heritage whose hiring represents Sterling International's commitment to diverse leadership. "Ms. Sterling, I wanted to let you know that we've implemented all the recommended changes from your audit. Our staff training now includes quarterly bias awareness sessions, and we have a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. More importantly," Amara replies, "you've created an environment where every passenger feels welcomed and respected. That's not just good business, it's basic human decency." Elena's phone buzzes with notifications from her social media followers, many of whom have shared their own experiences of discrimination and the changes they've witnessed in recent months. "The conversation has expanded beyond airports," she explains. People are talking about bias in restaurants, hotels, retail stores, several where that customer service intersects with prejudice. Change often requires a catalyst, Amara observes. Sometimes that catalyst is a lawsuit. Sometimes it's negative publicity. Sometimes it's a viral video. But the most sustainable change comes from leaders who understand that treating people with dignity isn't just morally right. It's strategically smart. James pulls out his tablet to show statistics from the aviation industry's quarterly reports. Customer satisfaction scores are up across the board for companies that implemented bias training after your incident. It turns out that when you treat all customers with respect, everyone's experience improves. The conversation shifts to the broader implications of what they've witnessed. This incident became a case study in business schools, Amara notes. Students are learning that in the age of social media, discriminatory behavior can destroy careers and companies within hours. The cost of prejudice has become too high for rational businesses to accept. But the real lesson, Elena adds, is that change is possible when people are willing to speak up. I could have just watched what happened to you and felt bad about it. Instead, I decided to document it and share it with the world. That choice made all the difference, Sarah nods enthusiastically. I've started recording my own experiences when I faced discrimination, not to shame people, but to create accountability. When people know their behavior might be documented and shared, they think twice about how they treat others. The group falls into contemplative silence as they consider the journey from that afternoon of humiliation to this moment of reflection. The transformation isn't just about corporate policy changes or employee training. It's about a fundamental shift in how society responds to discrimination. You know what I'm most proud of? Amara says finally. It's not that Derek and Richard were fired, or that the company implemented new policies. It's that we created a conversation about dignity and respect that extends far beyond this lounge. That's the real victory. When individual justice becomes social change. 6 months after the incident, Amara Sterling stands before a packed auditorium at a national business leadership conference. Her presentation titled, Ethical Leadership in the Age of Accountability. The audience includes CEOs, managers, and emerging leaders from across the corporate spectrum, all seeking to understand how to navigate the intersection of business success and social responsibility. The question isn't whether you have the power to demand respect, she begins, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's lived both sides of the power equation. The question is whether you have the courage to act with dignity when respect is denied. Every time we stay silent in the face of injustice, we choose complicity over character. The presentation screen displays Elena's viral video, now viewed over 5 million times and credited with inspiring policy changes across multiple industries. The footage serves as a powerful reminder that in the digital age, discrimination doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in front of an audience that can choose to act or ignore. Change doesn't happen in boardrooms or courtrooms alone, Amara continues. It happens when ordinary people choose extraordinary courage. When we stand up, speak out, and refuse to accept, that's just how things are. Her words resonate through the auditorium, captured by dozens of phones and shared across social media platforms where they'll reach thousands of additional viewers. The ripple effect that began with one incident of discrimination has grown into a movement of accountability and awareness. I want to challenge each of you to take specific action, Amara says, her tone shifting from inspirational to practical. Download apps that allow anonymous reporting of discrimination. Support businesses that demonstrate inclusive practices through their actions, not just their marketing. Use your social media platforms responsibly to amplify justice rather than division. The audience begins taking notes, recognizing that they're receiving not just motivation, but actionable guidance for creating change in their own organizations and communities. Research the diversity records of companies before you choose their services, she continues. Vote with your wallet for organizations that match your values. And, most importantly, speak up when you witness bias, even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable. Elena, now a recognized voice in corporate accountability, joins Amara on stage. The technology exists to document injustice, she says. But technology alone doesn't create change. People do. When we choose to record discrimination, share it responsibly, and demand accountability, we transform individual incidents into systemic solutions. The presentation concludes with a call to action that extends beyond the conference room. Your voice matters, Amara says, her words carrying the weight of experience and the promise of possibility. Your actions matter. Your choices matter. Use them to create the world you want to live in. As the audience rises in sustained applause, phones throughout the auditorium capture and share the moment. The message spreads across social media platforms, extending the reach of the call to action far beyond the conference attendees. The final slide displays a simple but powerful message. The arc of justice bends toward equality, but only when we grab it and pull. Later, as audience members stream out of the auditorium, conversations continue in hallways and hotel lobbies. Business cards are exchanged, partnerships are proposed, and commitments are made to implement change within individual organizations. The presentation has achieved its goal, transforming awareness into action. This is how change happens, Elena tells her social media followers in a live video from the conference, not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through millions of individual choices to do better, be better, and demand better from the institutions that shape our society. The story that began with discrimination in an airport lounge has become a catalyst for transformation across industries and communities. Derek and Richard's careers ended not just because of their prejudicial behavior, but because society has evolved to a point where such behavior carries consequences that extend far beyond individual incidents. Your voice matters. Your actions matter. Use them. Amara's words echo through social media feeds, conference discussions, and corporate boardrooms. The simple message carries the power to transform not just individual behaviors, but the culture that enables or prevents discrimination. The arc of justice bends toward equality, but only when ordinary people choose extraordinary courage. The choice belongs to each of us, in every moment when we witness injustice and decide whether to act or remain silent. In that choice lies the power to create the change we want to see in the world.